Good morning. This is going to be my first attempt at fiction, so this is what we're going to be reading. Alright, Puffin Books. The Singing Stone. O.R. Melling was born in Ireland, but grew up in Toronto with her 7 sisters and 2 brothers. In her quest for meaning, excitement, and a regular income, Melling has been everything under the sun: barmaid, bank teller, secretary, waitress, professional student, hitchhiker, dancer, and reserve force sailor. She slept through a month of law school once, and at another time climbed a mountain in Borneo. Though she has a BA in philosophy and an MA in medieval history, this has not prevented her from becoming a video head. At present, Melling is living in Ireland, a Canadian in exile. But she is planning to come home one of these days. Looks like this book was copyrighted. It was first published by Penguin Books Canada Limited in 1986. Alright, here's got a quote. Labor Gabala. The truth was not known beneath the sky of stars, whether they were of heaven or of earth. There we go. Alright, we're 2 minutes here. This is dedicated to Georgie and Kevin, alias Mom and Dad, with all my love. Alright, very small acknowledgements here. A long list of thanks, as so many helped to keep soul and body happy while this book was being written. Agents John Duff and Grace Deutsch, editor Cynthia Good, innumerable friends, especially Margot McBurney, and Joanne Tripuk, the entire Whalen family, in-laws and outlaws, Beryl George, as ever, for help with the book. The residents of Massey College, summer 1985, in particular, Nicholas Staines and Charles Halpern, who were kidnapped outright for the story. Bernard and Mary Lowland, and all the Tyrone Guthrie Center Company, Monaghan, Eyre, all my relatives in Bray and Dublin, and last but not least, Tony McCabe, New Bliss, for driving me around to much needed places. Thanks also to Claire Duffy and the Commissioners of Public Works, Eyre, for special entrance into New Grange, the Bro Na Bonnet. That is the way it looks to me. Alright, we got part 1. The quest. I do not read fiction, so just bear with me here and my own enthusiasm for trying this book. I cannot remember if it was my son or my brother who gave it to me and asked me to please read something that they thought was entertaining. Thank you for being with me as we experiment together. Chapter 1. The old apartment building stood on a quiet, lonely street, like the secluded monastery set in the heart of the city. Its stone walls were dark and scarred with age, looking down on a small paved courtyard and a little pool that gleamed with moonlight. The night was warm with the breath of the midsummer's breeze, and in the shadow of the walls, a great oak tree rustled with graceful whispers. A lone figure crouched at the edge of the pool, a young girl with blonde hair that fell lightly over her shoulders. She wore a long woolen shawl draped around her nightgown, and her feet were bare. As she leaned over the pool, her features were reflected in the water. A narrow face, vague and lost in thought, and gray eyes that shone as pale as her hair. Kay Warwick had been awakened from a dream, the same dream which had come to her again and again that past month. "Who's calling me?" she whispered. "How can I answer if I don't know?" She trailed her hand in the pool, and as if the ripples disturbed her reflection, she recalled the other face, the one in her dream. Beautiful woman with hair streaming like fire and eyes that glittered like emerald stones. And behind the lovely face, visions of madness, a riot of color, things falling apart, bursting open like fireworks or explosions. There was no form to the dream, but it conveyed a clear and undeniable message. A wild cry of the heart and mind, a cry for help. Kay wasn't frightened by nightmares. Strange dreams and images had haunted her throughout her young life. It was part of the great mystery of her existence, a mystery she had only begun to unravel. "Everything all right?" came a voice beside her. Kay jumped up in fright, nearly falling into the pool in her haste. A hand reached out to steady her, then withdrew again as she let out a cry. "Sorry to startle you," the young man said quickly. "I'm Alan Menduka. I live in the building. I'm just getting home from a late night at the library." As if to confirm his words, he shifted the books that were cradled under his arms. Though she didn't return his smile, Kay calmed down when she recognized him. A student at the university. She had often passed him in the hall on her way to work, and he always said hello. A foreigner. Judging by his accent and looks, he had a pleasant, handsome face. It was squarish and strong-featured, with dark eyes and a dark complexion. But his build was stocky, and he stood with legs apart, confident and unshakable. She could sense in his stance and the steady gaze of his eyes a certain strength of character. Alan, in turn, was appraising Kay. He had noticed her from time to time as she tended to dress in a exotic fashion, long skirts and vivid blouses, with bracelets and earrings that tinkled like a wind chime. She looked like a gypsy, despite her fair coloring, and that peculiar look which seemed to come from behind her pale gray eyes, instead of looking at you directly. At first glance, she appeared frail and waif-like, but there was also about her an aloof and independent air. "You'll catch cold," he said in a deliberately friendly voice, pointing to her bare feet. Kay shrugged and didn't answer him. Images were forming in her mind, like pictures, dancing in a mirror, and she knew they belonged to Alan somehow. These kinds of images had come to her since she was a child, but they still unsettled her, like an invasion of her thoughts. They appeared and disappeared without her consent or control in this case. However, the images were quite pleasant. An island in a blue, sun-warmed sea, a man riding his horse by the shore, The rider wore a white tunic over shining mail, and his shield was emblazoned with an 8-pointed cross. "Do you come from an island country?" Kay asked Alan abruptly. Alan looked surprised, but answered with a quick nod. "I'm from Malta." "Makes sense," Kay murmured. At least she could figure that one out. The images were often incomprehensible. She guessed that it was Alan's ancestry she had seen, and she was pleased to think of him as coming from a line of knights or kings, perhaps. She was beginning to like him. "I'm going to an island tomorrow," she said in a friendlier tone. "To Ireland." "Off on holidays?" he asked. "No, not holidays," and she frowned as she thought of her reason for going. "It's a long story," she said uneasily. "I'd like to hear it," Alan said, seeing his chance. "But you shouldn't stay out here. Why don't you throw on some clothes and come over to my apartment for a cup of tea?" Kay's frown deepened, and he added quickly, "I'm perfectly trustworthy, believe me. I come from a good family." "I know," Kay said, interrupting him with a little laugh. She did feel she could trust him, and she really needed to talk to someone. "What is your apartment number?" "And what's your name?" he asked, when he had told her. By the time Kay arrived at Alan's door, he had made the pot of tea and set it out on a little table with sugar and milk. She took the cup he offered her and curled up in the one big armchair in the room. She looked around at the shelves of books, the desk cluttered with papers, and the old sofa opposite her where Alan was now reclining. "What do you study?" she asked him. "Political science," he said. "Rather boring, I'm afraid. How to govern and misgovern. I'm just finishing my master thesis. But you're going to tell me about your trip," he prompted. Kay sighed. Where to begin, so that it wouldn't sound ridiculous? "I'm an orphan," she said bluntly, with a trace of defiance. Alan raised his eyebrows at her tone, but remained silent. "I was in an institution when I was very little, and when I was fostered out from home to home, some were good, some weren't." She shrugged painfully. "I was never adopted. Too strange, I guess." She added these last words more for herself than for him. She was already sifting the information she would give him. She decided to leave out the part about the dreams and images. "My last foster mother wrote to the orphanage to see if she could discover anything about my history, but there was nothing to find. I was an abandoned baby, really and truly left on the doorstep." Again, the pained shrug. Alan was listening intently and watching Kay's expressions as she spoke. His interest was sincere, and he added the occasional to encourage her past the difficult parts. "My last foster mother was the best, actually, but I left her when I turned 16. I was fed up with living in other people's homes, so I got a job and moved out on my own. I thought that was it, look after myself, grow up or whatever. Then early last year..." She paused, suddenly afraid to tell him what had happened. It seemed far too absurd to relate, and kept to herself, if was perhaps more real. Alan made one of the encouraging noises, and she continued. "I got this parcel in the mail. No letter, no return address, but it was definitely for me. Parcel of books, 18 in all, which is the age I'm supposed to be. Funny coincidence, huh? She lifted her hands in a gesture of disbelief. They're very old books, some falling apart, with worn leather covers and fancy print. It was kind of neat, really. A surprise gift from nowhere. But who sent them? Most of them are in English. Lovely stories, legends and fairy tales from all over Europe. But some are written in the language I couldn't recognize at first. I took one of the books to the library, and the old guy there told me it looked like Gaelic. He said I should contact a language professor at the university. So I did. And Kay started laughing. I spent the year learning Old Irish, believe it or not. At the university? Alan asked. Nah, said Kay. I didn't finish high school, but the professor was really nice, and she lent me a stack of dictionaries and grammars. I taught myself. She smiled proudly. I spent this year translating the Irish books. Did them all. I'm quite good at it now. Well done, Alan murmured admiringly. Then he shook his head. But what does it all mean? Kay slapped the arm of her chair. Exactly my question. A pensive look came over her face. Through the stories, though the stories are from different countries, they're all about the same thing. And the Irish books made that clear to me. It was like wandering through a maze. Each story is set around those ancient stone monuments. Some of the English books call them megaliths, tombs and Stonehenges and stuff like that. And then at the heart of every story is something called the Singing Stone. It always holds the answer to everything. Alan's eyes widened. Kay saw the doubt in his look as he began to wonder if she was spinning him an elaborate yarn. One story was set in Malta, she told him, hoping to regain his confidence. It was about a great stone temple. Alan's doubts disappeared as he nodded with excitement. Yes, we have megaliths too, though few people know about them. Very old and beautiful temples. I used to play in them when I was a kid. Another coincidence? Kay thought to herself. She almost told him then about her dreams and the strange images that would come into her mind when she was awake. What relief it would be to share that secret with someone. She was tired of keeping everything to herself, never knowing what anything meant, forever wondering why she was so different. But her chance passed by as Alan suddenly decided that they should have some toast and a fresh pot of tea. Kay watched as he bustled around the kitchenette, plugging in the toaster and putting the kettle on to boil. He apologized for the lack of jam and biscuits, all the time bemoaning the life of the poor student. Kay found herself laughing with him. She was enjoying herself thoroughly. This late-night visit was something new for her. She had never had any friends, male or female. She was always too shy and withdrawn, too strange. She changed her mind again about the dreams and images. She would definitely not tell him. He had been kind enough to believe the rest of her story, and she couldn't bring herself to test him further. Alan offered her the plate of buttered toast and poured out their tea. Then he sat down again with a completely absorbed look. He said seriously, This is really amazing. Do you think the books might have something to do with your past? Maybe someone has sent them to you as a kind of clue that you are to follow, like a mystery story. Kay munched quietly on her toast, too nervous to speak at first. He had expressed her innermost hope, and again she felt it might lose its reality if she said it out loud. That is what I believe, she managed to say at last, and that's why I'm going to Ireland. The stories all point to the Singing Stone, and it's supposed to be standing somewhere in that country. Crazy as it sounds, I'm going to look for it. Alan was quiet for a while as he mulled over everything she had told him. It was all rather incredible, and yet he couldn't deny the logic of her decision. He would do the same thing himself, given the same circumstances, no matter how mad it appeared. Wild goose chase? With a pang of sympathy, he looked closely at the girl, at her tall, slim form, thin face, and pale eyes. But really? He said with a flush of anger. I'd like to know who sent you those books. If they wanted you to go off to Ireland on this search, why didn't they just come out and tell you? What kind of game are they playing? I think it's rather cruel. Alan stopped speaking. His emotions were running high. Tangled up with this girl who had been a stranger only a short time before. He shook his head. There are some very strange people in this world. Yes, there are, Kay murmured. She grew aware of the lateness of the night, and she was exhausted after revealing so much. She stood up with a slow, graceful movement. I have to go now. My plane leaves early tomorrow. Thanks so much for the tea and toast and all. Alan stood up also, and as they were the same height, their eyes stared into each other. You are a courageous woman, he said with genteel formality, and he kissed her on the cheek. I wish you a safe and successful journey. As he opened the door for her, he asked hopefully, Are you coming back here? In a month, Kay answered with a shy smile. Let me know when you do, he said, and then he grinned. I want to hear the rest of the story. And that is the end of chapter 1. Thank you for being with me. I appreciate you.